Meet Zac Hatfield-Dodds, a tech enthusiast with a taste for the simple things in life. Originally, you're from Australia. Jack is a Python software foundation fellow and the force behind Hypothesis and PyTest. Now, he is in San Francisco with Anthropic, and he is here today to simplify your coding life with no more nitpicks, effortless cleanup with fixes, formatters, and code mods. Let's warmly welcome Jack Phil.
Thank you all. I should mention I am by no means the only person behind these libraries that were just mentioned, but one core developer among several. But today, unusually, I'm not talking about software testing. I want to talk about a different approach that I take to code quality, which has been especially impactful for me and my colleagues as Anthropic has grown. And that's the idea that we can get past the nitpicky parts of code review by using these tools that I'm going to talk about. So we've got a short talk, but in 3 parts. In the first, I'm going to talk through kind of the ideas and the philosophy behind this approach to code quality. The second, I'll talk about some specific tools that we can use. And in the third, I will attempt a live demo. Please pray for me. And so the first part of the philosophy is that kind of our code matters, right? We have this lovely set of principles of which most have been written down. And people talk a lot about code quality, about code style, about elegance. And I think this genuinely does matter. It can make us more productive. It can make our jobs more fun. And readability is a big part of this. In particular, one of the things that makes code readable is when everyone is using the same style. Python gives us a lovely syntax to write nice readable code in, but you have probably at some point opened up a file of Python code and thought something along the lines of, oh no, what's in here? What am I staring at? Who wrote this? Oh, it was me. I at least have that experience pretty regularly. And for the demo later in this talk, I'm going to be pulling out one of my oldest Python projects, which I wrote almost a decade ago, and used a somewhat different code style than I would today. But sometimes, as programmers, we get a little over-focused on particular details. We start to think that my preferred text editor is better than your preferred text editor if you disagree with me about which that is, that we might argue over whether to use tabs or spaces in other languages, or about where to put the parentheses on a particular line. Or we might just have a lot of lint rules, and you start to wonder, does this one really matter? Is it really worth forcing me or my colleagues or my teammates to spend this much time on it? And so part of this attitude that I want to talk through is that I think often it doesn't matter, and we should actually be more relaxed about code quality and find some things which we can delegate to machines and some things which we just shouldn't worry about at all. I think sometimes it's so easy to write a new tool to find problems that we don't really think about whether the problems need to be fixed. But sometimes, conversely, we have a lint rule or a principle where we can detect cases and only some of those cases are a problem. And one useful attitude here is to decide in advance, do you want to fix all of the cases, regardless of whether or not it's a problem, or none of the cases, regardless of whether or not it's a problem? Because these are basically the 2 options you get as your team grows, as new people come on. If you're running an open source project, when random kind internet strangers show up and want to do free work to help you and your users. And so I try to consider, when I'm looking at a new lint rule or code quality principle, does this matter enough that I want to enforce it even when it's probably a false alarm? Sometimes the answer is yes, but sometimes the answer is no. And that no is really important, right? Just being able to say, this is a thing which doesn't matter enough to cost us time and energy in parts of our lives, because there are so many other things we could be doing. But the net result of all of this is we can get to a code style where the tools help us, all of us, to write consistent code. Ideally so that you can't necessarily tell who wrote the code by looking at the style or the comments or something else. Of course, when we say one obvious way to do it, we mean usually this is obvious in hindsight. I'll talk more about that in a moment. So, particular tools that I use for this. I talked to, or had on my first slide, about linters, auto-formatters, and fixes. And I'll define those. A linter is a tool which reads your code and complains about it in some way. Who here has had a linter complain about their code this week? Yeah, most of us. A formatter is code which looks at your program and just reformats it. It changes the way it's laid out, maybe the way it looks, but it doesn't change the functionality at all. Anyone use one of those this week? Many of us again. Can I get some audience suggestions? What tools do we use here? Black, rough. Rough is the third category, but black is a classic formatter, and I'm glad we all like that particular color. We don't like it. Well,
There's one from Google which I don't remember. I like that one because
yeah.
there's a lot of configuration options and then you forget about it for the rest of your life.
Exactly. I don't like configuration options.
Yeah, I know.
So this is why I want one obvious way, because every project can choose different configuration options. So part of my philosophy is if we want consistency across an organization or across an ecosystem, not just across a project or a team, I think it's valuable to have tools which we collectively invest in that have good defaults, that consider those carefully, and then we can all move on with our lives instead of opening up a new file and being like, man, who configured this one? Rough kind of does it all, yeah. Rough is what we would call a fixer. So rough will actually make semantic changes to your code. For example, things with mutable default values for function arguments or unused variables. Rough can actually fix a lot of these automatically, but we'll talk about Rough in a moment. One tool that I love is PyUpgrade. Who here started using Python when it was older than Python 3.8? Yeah, a lot of us. That means that the version of Python you were writing for has now gone end of life. But the good news here is that the version of Python that I hope you are using today has all kinds of nice goodies. For example, keyword-only arguments or positional-only arguments are a new way which can make APIs more readable. And PyUpgrade can automatically upgrade your code to take advantage of new syntax features. So this is a lovely way to find just the constant stream of little things like functools.liu cache can now be called without parentheses if you just want the default behavior. And PyUpgrade will just make that happen for you without you needing to manually upgrade all of your legacy code. It makes reading old code bases a little more pleasant. iSort. It sorts your imports. And it's compatible with Black now, which is lovely. There's not that much more to say there. People like sorted imports. It does make it easier to tell what even got imported. And of course, there's the famous Black tool, right? Black, you can tell it what version of Python you're using, and it will format accordingly. Autoflake is another tool which actually fixes some lint errors. So this is a reference to the Flake 8 linter, most of the rules of which are now built into Rough. And autoflake can do things like remove unused imports, remove unused variables, fix a whole bunch of like simple lint rules syntactically. And shed. Who here has heard of shed? 2 people. Wow, this is great. Shed is my tool that I wrote, which wraps all of those tools I told you about before. And it has no configuration options. You can tell it what version of Python you're using, and that's it. If you want to tell it, you can also specify which files to format, but by default, it will just ask Git, like list all the Python files in this repo. That's what I'll format for you. And it wraps the others, it configures them all, it makes sure their configuration is compatible, and it includes a bunch of custom logic that I wrote to do other little refactoring steps. And so Shed is my personal favorite because it perfectly matches all of my style opinions. And if you think my opinions are good, you're welcome to use it too. And then the last tool, which I got from the audience just now, is Rough. Rough is a recently developed Python linter and now also autofixer, which has adopted many of the lint rules from the Flake 8 and the surrounding ecosystem of plugins and put them into one tool, which is implemented in Rust. That makes it incredibly fast, and the developers have also offered autofixes. So the tool can automatically fix many common problems. For example, a missing time zone argument to date times. You can run only the fixes, or you can run the fixes and also report the remaining lint errors. With me so far? Then let's look at a live demo. Let's look at a live demo. Okay. So, the simple one, I haven't changed anything yet, right? I did take my old code and run black on it, just so that we wouldn't see like an ocean of formatting opinions, which I no longer endorse. But if we run shed, then we can ask, what does shed change here? So shed, via these other tools like PyUpgrade, does a couple of things. It says, well, We're always using UTF-8 by default now in Python, so we no longer need to specify that if we assume that we're using a modern Python version. And this file doesn't actually use shellx at all. We have f-strings. F-strings are great. I really enjoy reading code with f-strings. I had some unused things and unsorted imports. Nicer syntax for name tuple, which is new. IO error still exists, but as of Python 3, we prefer to say OS error. More f-strings, more f-strings, more f-strings, more IO error, magic trailing comma from black, and a couple of other things. So this is a pretty nice set of readability changes, and my code still does exactly the same thing. We can also tell Shed to run in refactor mode, which just enables some of those extra checks that I talked about before. And in this case, that's not actually going to do very much. In this case, we just say, okay, we're called dict. This is not safe in general because maybe I assigned something else to the global name dict. I've seen things, man. But if you tell Shed, like, trust me, it's probably okay. Shed will be a little more aggressive about what it assumes. So we'll use dict literals, and we can also use type annotations or variable annotations instead of those comments. So that's pretty nice. If we want to do rough, let's see what rough thinks if we just fix only. Well, rough is extremely quick and tells us that we fixed one error. What was it? It was an unused import, which we missed before. So, between fixes, formatters, linters, and other tools, I think we can get to less nitpicky code, giving us more time to focus on the things that matter, but with just as nice code as we've ever been used to. So, thanks very much. I'm happy to take questions. All right.
Not so much a question, just a comment. Rough has auto-formatting in alpha now.
Rough also has auto-formatting in alpha, which is very exciting.
Thank you so much, sir.
Any other questions? Just wait for the microphone, sorry.
How bad of an idea is it to roll your own tool to format everything your way for your team or whatever? Does that take a lot of work, a little work? Can you comment?
I'm not telling you I made a terrible mistake by starting an entirely new open source project. But if Shed already exists, I would probably just use Shed or a similar thing. I do think it's been a very useful pattern for me to notice when my team or company keeps making some particular pattern of code, right? Maybe we have some kind of bug that keeps coming back or something, and writing custom linters or fixes for that can be really useful. And using tools like the libcst framework, it can also be remarkably easy. So I think more people should try it, and you probably don't want to publish it though, because then other people report bugs and you have to fix them.
The second part makes sense, thank you.
Thank you. Anyone?
Well, if there are no other questions, I'll be outside for anyone who wants to talk to me. Thanks so much for coming,
Thank
everyone.
you so much, sir, for your valuable insights.